Nexus Orbital hung in the void like a monument to interstellar cooperation, all gleaming metal and carefully calibrated lighting designed not to offend any of the 83 species who called the Galactic Council home. It was beautiful, sterile, and, according to Lieutenant Brooke Hanson, about as warm as a tax audit. She stood in the observation corridor, watching her 6-year-old twins press their faces against the transparent aluminum viewport, leaving nose prints that would probably violate some cleanliness protocol she hadn't read yet. Toby was narrating an elaborate story about the passing cargo ships being space pirates. Mila was trying to count stars, had reached 4,016, and showed no signs of stopping. "Mom, can we go to the eating place now?" Toby asked, peeling his face away from the glass and leaving behind a smudge that resembled a small mammal. "I'm hungry enough to eat a whole asteroid." "That's not how asteroids work," Mila said, not pausing her count. 4,018, 4,019. "Kids eat rocks all the time," Toby countered. "Remember when you ate that weird pebble at the park?" "That was a mint. 4,021. Brooke closed her eyes and counted to 5, which was as high as she could get before her military training kicked in, and reminded her that she'd survived combat deployments, hostile negotiations, and that one time the ship's gravity failed during lunch. She could handle a diplomatic dinner with 2 first-graders in tow. Probably. The childcare situation had collapsed exactly 4 hours before the dinner. Something about the station's youth center, discovering that human children had different biological needs than, say, the methane-breathing offspring of the colth, who apparently spent their formative periods in suspended crystallization. The center's director, a well-meaning blob of sentient plasma, had apologized profusely while also admitting they had no idea what to do with creatures that leaked fluids, required constant feeding, and asked an average of 400 questions per hour. So here she was, military liaison to the Galactic Council, wearing her dress uniform and herding 2 miniature chaos agents toward what was supposed to be a nice, calm, utterly boring cultural exchange dinner. The universe, Brooke had learned, had a sick sense of humor. The dining hall occupied the station's central ring, where artificial gravity was most stable, and the view least likely to cause nausea in species with inner ears, or outer ears, or the crystalline vibration sensors that the Ixpella used instead of ears. Brooke had stopped trying to keep track of who had what. Ambassador Ukmoth waited at the entrance, all 4 arms folded in what the translation matrix helpfully identified as formal greeting posture. The Kaloth were insectoid, chitinous, and obsessed with cleanliness to a degree that made human germaphobes look relaxed. Ukmoth's exoskeleton gleamed under the soft lighting, polished to a mirror shine. Compound eyes fractured Brooke's reflection into 1,000 tiny versions of herself, each looking equally uncomfortable. "Lieutenant Brooke," Ukmoth's translator clicked and hummed, converting the ambassador's natural communication into something human ears could process. "You honor us with your presence, and you have brought offspring?" The way Ukmoth said offspring made it sound like Brooke had brought biological samples to a sterile laboratory. "My kids, yes. Toby and Mila." Brooke put a hand on each small shoulder, partly an introduction, partly to keep them from touching anything expensive. "Our childcare arrangements fell through. I hope that's not a problem." Ukmoth's antennae twitched in a pattern that the translator didn't bother interpreting, which probably meant it was something along the lines of, "Why do humans bring their larvae to formal occasions?" but was too polite to say. Instead, the ambassador's 4 arms unfolded in a gesture that might have been a shrug. "The Kaloth find younglings fascinating, Their chaos is so organic. Another untranslated antenna twitch. Please, enter. The meal is prepared to accommodate human dietary requirements. We have been assured nothing will poison you. That's reassuring, Brooke muttered, ushering the twins inside. The dining area was less a room and more a cathedral to the concept of cleanliness. Every surface gleamed. The tables, low platforms designed to accommodate species of varying heights and limb configurations, looked like they'd been sterilized enough to perform surgery on. The floors were so polished that Toby immediately tried to slide across them in his dress shoes before Brooke caught his collar. Walking. We use walking. But it's so shiny. That's because nothing has ever touched it, and we're going to keep it that way. Other diplomats had already gathered, a collection of the galaxy's finest, trying to make small talk across language barriers and fundamental biological differences. The Donkai ambassador, a slug-like being whose name Brooke couldn't pronounce without dislocating her jaw, oozed contentedly on a moisture pad. Two Expella observers refracted light through their crystalline bodies, creating small rainbows on the walls that Mila immediately became obsessed with. "Mom, can I—" No touching the light beings. "I wasn't going to touch them. You were absolutely going to touch them." Mila's offended expression suggested Brooke had committed a great injustice, but 6 years of parenting had given her the ability to read her daughter's intentions from 3 rooms away. The meal itself was surprisingly pleasant, which should have been Brooke's first warning that the universe was setting her up. The Kaloth took food seriously, and Ukmoth had clearly spent considerable time ensuring human-compatible dishes. There was something that resembled chicken, if chicken had been raised on a different planet, under a different sun, and seasoned with spices that didn't exist in Earth's chemistry. It tasted good, which was all Brooke cared about. Toby and Mila were on their best behavior, which was concerning. They sat quietly, ate their food without complaint, and only asked moderately embarrassing questions like, "Do the Donkai poop slime?" and "Why does that one look like my nightlight?" Brooke was just starting to relax when dessert arrived. The Kaloth brought out dishes, actual plates, not the disposable containers most species used, made from some ceramic that caught the light like pearl. They were beautiful, delicate, and probably worth more than Brooke's annual salary. The desserts themselves were small sculptures of frozen compounds, sweet and cold, and so precisely constructed that eating them felt like vandalism. In Kaloth culture, Ukmoth explained, all 4 hands moving in elaborate patterns, the meal is not complete until the cleaning is complete. The purification of the eating vessels is as important as the food itself. It is meditation. It is art. It is— Can we help? Toby's hand shot up like he was in class. Brooke's blood pressure spiked. "Toby, no! We're really good at dishes," Mila added, bouncing in her seat. "We help at home all the time." This was technically true. It was also true that helping usually meant Brooke spent twice as long cleaning up after the helping than she would have spent just doing it herself. But before she could redirect the conversation, Ukmoth's antennae perked up with what looked like delight. How wonderful! Human younglings learning responsibility. The ambassador's translator practically chirped. This is the cultural exchange we hoped for. Yes, yes, the offspring may assist in the purification ritual. The other diplomats murmured approval, or whatever their species did instead of murmuring. The Donkai bubbled encouragingly. The Expella chimed in harmonics that suggested agreement. Brooke felt the situation slipping away from her like water through a sieve. She'd learned to trust her instincts, the little voice that had kept her alive through bad situations and worse decisions. Right now, That voice was screaming. But she was also a diplomat, sort of, and the entire galaxy was watching humanity to see if they could play nice with others. Saying no to a cultural exchange involving her children helping with chores would make humans look bad. Overprotective, unwilling to let their young participate. So Brooke smiled, showed teeth in what she hoped looked friendly and not feral, and said, "That would be lovely. Thank you, Ambassador." Yukmoth's compound eyes glittered with what might have been joy or might have been the reflection of overhead lights. Compound eyes were hard to read. "Excellent. Come, younglings. The purification chamber awaits." Toby and Mila scrambled from their seats, vibrating with enthusiasm. Brooke followed, her instincts still screaming, wondering if diplomatic incidents came with hazard pay. The kitchen was beyond the dining area, through a doorway that irised open with a whisper of pressurized air. If the dining hall was a cathedral to cleanliness, the kitchen was its holy of holies. Everything was chrome and ceramic, surfaces that had never known the indignity of a fingerprint. The washing station dominated one wall, a complex arrangement of basins, sprayers, and what looked like miniature scanning arrays. "This is where the purification happens," Ukamoth explained, all four arms gesturing with religious fervor. "The water must be precisely heated. The cleansing solution must be measured exactly. The drying cloths are blessed by, well, your translation matrix probably cannot process the concept, but they are very clean cloths." Toby stared at the setup with the intensity of a general surveying a battlefield. Mila was already reaching for a basin before Brooke caught her hand. "Instructions first," Brooke said firmly. "Then touching." Ukamoth walked them through the process, which involved more steps than Brooke's military academy graduation ceremony. Temperature calibration, soap-to-water ratios that required 3 decimal points, a specific order for washing, rinsing, and drying that seemed to be based on the dish's molecular composition. Brooke watched her children's faces glaze over after about 15 seconds. This was going to be a disaster. She knew it the way she knew gravity pulled down and stars burned hot. But she was committed now, and backing out would be worse than whatever was about to happen. Probably. "Do you understand, younglings?" Ukmoth asked, antennae quivering with hope. "Yep," Toby said. "Totally," Mila agreed. They understood absolutely nothing, and they were about to prove it. Brooke had approximately 30 seconds of false hope before physics and 6-year-olds formed their natural alliance against order. Yukmoth demonstrated the soap dispenser, a sleek chrome cylinder mounted on the wall above the primary basin. One measured pump produced exactly 2.3 milliliters of cleaning solution, formulated specifically for Kaloth use. The ambassador pressed down with one elegant chitinous hand, and a single pearl of translucent blue liquid emerged. "See? Precise. Controlled. 1 pump per vessel. No more." Toby nodded with the enthusiasm of someone who had no intention of following those instructions. The moment Ukmoth stepped back to retrieve the first dishes, Toby launched himself at the dispenser like it was a carnival game. His small human hands, designed by evolution for climbing trees and making messes, not precision, grabbed the pump mechanism. Press, 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 press. "Toby!" Brooke lunged, but 6-year-olds have reaction times honed by avoiding bedtime and vegetables. Blue soap fountained into the basin. Not the delicate measured droplets Ukamoth had demonstrated, but a genuine cascade, thick and viscous and multiplying. As it hit the water, Mila had helpfully started running at full blast. "I'm making it extra clean," Toby announced proudly. Bubbles began forming immediately, because of course they did. Kaloth soap was apparently designed for maximum efficiency, which meant maximum bubble production. They rose from the basin like a sentient foam entity, expanding with aggressive enthusiasm. "Toby, stop!" Brooke reached for the pump, but Mila chose that exact moment to discover the temperature controls. Human understanding of warm water sat comfortably around 40 degrees Celsius. Kaloth, with their chitinous exoskeletons and different evolutionary path, considered warm to be closer to 75. The difference between pleasant bath and minor scalding. Mila turned the dial enthusiastically to the right. Steam erupted from the basin, hitting the cold station air and creating instant fog. The bubbles, now superheated, expanded even faster, spilling over the basin's edge and onto the pristine floor with the inevitability of gravity. "Oh, that's not good," Brooke said, which was like calling a supernova somewhat bright. Ukmoth turned from arranging dishes, all four arms freezing mid-motion. Compound eyes fixed on the growing foam catastrophe, with what the translator rendered as a strangled clicking sound, but was probably more accurately translated as the Kaloth equivalent of someone watching their worst nightmare manifest in real time. "The floor! The purification floor is being contaminated!" Brooke waded into the bubbles, which had reached mid-shin and showed no signs of stopping. She grabbed for the temperature dial, trying to shut off the water. But the controls were designed for four armed beings with completely different ergonomics. Her human hands fumbled. That's when the station's automated systems decided to join the party. Cleaning drones, small disc-shaped robots that normally stayed hidden in wall recesses, emerged with mechanical purpose. They'd been programmed to maintain the station's sterile environment, which meant they had very strong opinions about unexpected substances coating previously pristine floors. Red warning lights began pulsing. Not the gentle advisory lights of a minor issue, but the aggressive strobing that suggested the station thought biological contamination was occurring. "Warning!" a calm automated voice announced in 17 languages simultaneously. "Unauthorized substance detected in Sector Delta 9. Initiating decontamination protocol Level 4. "Level 4?" Brooke shouted over the increasing alarm sounds. "What's Level 4? Ukamoth's translator made sounds that probably didn't have human equivalents, but suggested existential horror. "Level 4 is for plague scenarios." The drones activated sprayers mounted on their undersides, adding antiseptic mist to the already chaotic mixture of soap, steam, and 6-year-old determination. The bubbles, rather than dissipating, seemed to feed on the new chemical additions. They grew fluffier, more voluminous, and began spreading with alarming speed. "This is so cool!" Toby yelled from somewhere inside the foam. "It's like we're in a cloud." "Don't eat the bubbles," Brooke called back, because she knew her son well enough to know that instruction was necessary. Too late! "Toby!" Mila, meanwhile, had discovered the dish sprayer, a high-pressure nozzle designed for blast cleaning the crystallized residue that Kaloth food left behind. She pointed it at a stack of dishes and pulled the trigger. Water shot out with the pressure of a fire hose. The ceramic plates, beautiful, expensive, designed for careful handling by beings with 4 hands and exceptional coordination, took flight like oversized frisbees. They ricocheted off walls, spun through the air trailing soap bubbles, and created a sound like wind chimes having a nervous breakdown. One plate skimmed past Ukmoth's head. The ambassador ducked with surprising agility for someone having a cultural crisis. "The ceremonial dishes! They've been in my family for 6 generations. They're fine. They're just airborne." Brooke caught one plate, bobbled it, caught it again, and set it down before something else could go wrong. That's when the door irised open. The other diplomats had heard the alarms, or possibly the screaming, or maybe just the sound of centuries-old traditions being power-washed into oblivion. The Donkai ambassador oozed through first, taking in the scene with whatever sensory organs slug beings used. Bubbles coated the floor to a depth of about 3 feet now, still expanding. Steam reduced visibility to barely 10 feet. Drones zipped through the air, spraying antiseptic and adding to the general apocalyptic atmosphere. Then the Donkai did something unexpected. They started laughing, or at least making a burbling sound that the translators interpreted as laughter. And then they dove into the bubbles like a kid into a ball pit. "Oh, this is magnificent," the translator chirped as the Donkai surfaced, foam coating their moisture-dependent skin in ways that apparently felt amazing. "We require 87% humidity to be comfortable, and this is perfect. The human offspring have created paradise." The slug being began sliding through the bubbles, leaving trails like a snail but moving with genuine joy. They started doing loop-de-loops, figure eights, patterns that suggested this was the most fun they'd had in rotations. The Expelli observers floated in next, their crystalline bodies catching the red alarm lights and the steam and the bubbles, and refracting everything into a disco of bioluminescent chaos. They chimed in harmonic frequencies that probably meant, "What fresh chaos is this?" but came across as oddly musical. Soap got into their geometric structures, filling the gaps between crystalline matrices. Light bounced through the bubbles trapped inside their bodies, creating a kaleidoscope effect that was actually stunning. They looked like living light shows, and they seemed equally confused and fascinated by the development. "Mom!" Mila called from somewhere in the foam. "The spray thing won't turn off." Brooke waded deeper into the catastrophe, following the sound of high-pressure water and her daughter's voice. She found Mila holding the sprayer at arm's length, water still blasting out, the girl's face a mixture of guilt and panic that every parent recognizes. "The trigger's stuck." "Give it here." Brooke grabbed the nozzle, and of course the spray immediately redirected into her face, because the universe was keeping score, and humanity was losing. She wrestled with the mechanism, finally finding the manual shut-off valve and cranking it closed. The water stopped. The sudden silence, relative silence, given the alarms and the Donkai's joyful burbling, was almost shocking. Brooke wiped foam from her eyes and assessed the damage. The kitchen looked like a disaster movie, and a foam party had a baby. Bubbles covered every surface. The drones had given up on decontamination and were now just hovering in place, their programming unable to cope with this level of chaos. The Donkai was still sliding around, having the time of their life. The Expelli looked like disco balls designed by a fever dream. And Ukmoth stood at the entrance, all 4 arms hanging limp, antennae drooping in what could only be described as complete defeat. The ambassador's ceremonial robes, which had been pristine and pressed, were now soaked through and covered in bubbles. Compound eyes reflected 1,000 versions of the disaster. "My kitchen," Ukmoth whispered, the translator barely picking it up. "My sacred purification chamber. Generations of K-Loth have maintained this space, and now—" Brooke felt genuine guilt, which was impressive given that she'd spent the last 5 minutes in pure crisis management mode. This wasn't just about cleanliness to Ukmoth. This was cultural. Spiritual, maybe. "Ambassador, I am so sorry. We'll clean it up. We'll—" "Wait." Toby emerged from the bubbles like a swamp creature, hair plastered to his head, dress clothes completely ruined. But his face had that expression, the one that meant he'd noticed something. "Mr. Bug Ambassador, sir, why is water coming out of that wall?" Everyone turned. Behind a panel that had been dislodged by a flying plate, water trickled from a crack in the wall. Not soapy water, not hot water from their disaster. This was darker, with an oily sheen, dripping steadily from a fissure in what looked like a major conduit. Ukmoth's antenna shot straight up. The alarm in the ambassador's posture was immediate and visceral. That's the recycler line. That water should not be there. That water should not look like that. Brooke stepped closer, her military training kicking in. She'd seen enough ship malfunctions to recognize a serious problem. How long has this been leaking? It hasn't. It couldn't. We inspect everything. We clean everything. We would have noticed. Not if it's behind the wall, Brooke said quietly. Not if you're so focused on surface cleanliness that you never check the infrastructure. The implications hung in the air, heavier than the bubbles. Ukmoth moved toward the wall with the kind of slow, horrified deliberation usually reserved for approaching crime scenes or tax audits. All four hands reached out, trembling slightly, and touched the area around the crack. The chitinous fingers came away with a dark residue that definitely should not have been there. This is impossible. We maintain perfection. We scrub. We sterilize. We sanctify. You shine the surface, Brooke said, not unkindly. She waved for the kids to stay back, her tone shifting into the one she used when situations got serious. But when did you last check inside the walls? The ambassador's antennae drooped further, which apparently was the Kyloth version of, oh no, she's right. The purification protocols focus on visible contamination. What can be seen? What can be measured? What can be polished until it blinds you? Brooke finished. Yeah, we have a saying about that. Something about trees and forests. More diplomats crowded into the doorway now, drawn by the commotion and the fact that the alarms had shifted from contamination detected to structural failure detected, which was a lateral move at best. The Donkai had stopped their joyful sliding, and was now oozing closer to inspect the leak with what Brooke assumed was concern, though reading expressions on a slug being was like trying to read emotions on a potato. Is that what I think it is? One of the Expellee observers floated closer, their crystalline body refracting the light in ways that made the dark water look even more ominous. Their harmonic voice chimed through the translator. Because if that's recycled water contaminated with biological waste products? It is, Ukmoth whispered. This line feeds directly into the station's primary water purification system. If it's compromised, if it's been leaking into the wall cavity for any length of time, then you've got contaminated water in your drinking supply, Brooke finished, her stomach sinking. Possibly station-wide. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, despite the lingering steam from their earlier disaster. This wasn't about diplomatic embarrassment anymore. This was about the health and safety of every being on Nexus orbital. How long? The Donkai's translator carried a weight that suggested they understood the implications immediately. How long could this have been happening? Ukmoth's compound eyes fixed on the crack, then on the dislodged panel, then on the mountain of bubbles that had revealed the problem in the first place. The last full structural inspection was 6 cycles ago. We focus maintenance on visible areas, on the spaces where people gather, where cleanliness can be observed and admired. The eye behind walls. We assumed they were fine. The systems were installed when the station was built. They were supposed to last decades without intervention. Supposed to, Brooke repeated. But systems fail. Metal corrodes, seals degrade, especially in a station this size, with this much environmental variation. She turned to the watching crowd of diplomats. We need to shut down the water system. Now. before anyone else drinks from a contaminated source. But the disruption, Ukmoth started, then stopped. Even through the cultural and species barrier, Brooke could see the ambassador's priority calculations shifting in real time. You're right. Station Director Lumpex must be informed immediately. The ambassador pulled out a communication device and began speaking in rapid-fire clicks that the translator didn't bother interpreting. Probably technical jargon mixed with panic. While Ukmoth coordinated with Station Command, Brooke turned her attention to her children, who had gone quiet in the way kids do when adults start using serious voices. "You two okay? Is everyone going to get sick?" Mila asked, her earlier enthusiasm completely gone. She looked small and worried, covered in drying soap bubbles. "Not if we fix it now," Brooke said, crouching down to their eye level. "And we're going to fix it, because you found the problem." "We made a mess," Toby said quietly. "We messed up the dishes and the kitchen and—" "You made a mess that showed us something dangerous," Brooke corrected. "If you hadn't gone overboard with that soap, if we hadn't dislodged that panel, this leak would have kept going. Days, maybe weeks. People could have gotten seriously ill." Mila looked unconvinced. "But we weren't trying to find it. We just made bubbles everywhere." "Sometimes the best discoveries are accidents." Brooke pulled them both into a damp, soapy hug. "Welcome to being human. We stumble into solutions while looking for snacks." The communication device in Ukmoth's hand squawked with authority, and the ambassador turned back to the growing crowd. "Station Director Lumpex is initiating emergency protocols. All water distribution is being halted pending full system inspection. Teams are being dispatched to check every recycler line, every purification junction, every—" The translator hitched, suggesting Ukmoth was overwhelmed. "This is catastrophic. Our reputation for cleanliness, for maintaining perfect standards—" "Just saved lives," Brooke interrupted, standing up. "Because you let my kids help with dishes." The irony hung in the air like the remaining bubbles. "If we had maintained our protocols, if we had refused the human offspring, if we had kept the kitchen sealed and perfect—" Ukmoth's antennae twitched in patterns that suggested the ambassador was working through some serious cognitive dissonance. "You would have kept shining the surface while poison leaked behind the walls," the Donkai said, their translator adding a gentleness that seemed at odds with their slug-like appearance. "Perfection is sometimes just ignorance, with better lighting." Station personnel began arriving, maintenance crews with scanning equipment, medical teams preparing to assess potential contamination exposure, and administration officials who looked like they were already composing incident reports. The kitchen transformed from a disaster scene into a command center, though it still smelled overwhelmingly of soap. One of the maintenance crew, a multi-limbed being whose species Brooke didn't recognize, ran a scanning device over the crack in the wall. Their translator crackled to life. "Preliminary readings show biological contamination at level 6. This has been leaking for at least 3 cycles, possibly longer. The wall cavity is saturated. Microbial growth is extensive." "Level 6, Ukmoth repeated, and the way the ambassador said it suggested that was very bad. "That's enough to cause systemic illness across multiple species types. Digestive distress, neurological impacts for crystalline beings, respiratory complications." "But caught in time," Brooke interjected firmly, "before anyone showed symptoms, before it spread further." Another technician, this one resembling an octopus made of metal segments, spoke up from deeper in the wall cavity. They'd removed several panels now, revealing the full extent of the problem. Multiple junction points are compromised. This wasn't just one failure. The entire sector's water infrastructure is degraded beyond safety margins. Recommendation is full replacement, not repair. The financial and logistical implications of that statement hit the room like a physical force. Replacing an entire sector's water system would take weeks, possibly months. The cost would be astronomical. And the diplomatic fallout from the Keloth, known throughout the galaxy for their cleanliness, hosting a station with contaminated water, would be severe. How was this missed? Station Director Lumpex had arrived, a tall being who resembled a praying mantis crossed with a library bookshelf, all angles and sharp edges, and barely contained irritation. The Keloth are responsible for this sector's maintenance. You assured the Council that your protocols were flawless. Ukmoth's posture collapsed inward, a full-body expression of shame that transcended species barriers. We maintained what we could see. We believed that surface cleanliness indicated systemic health. We were wrong. Catastrophically wrong, Lumpex agreed, their translator making the words cut like scalpels. But honest about it now, Brooke said, stepping between the station director and the ambassador. Her military bearing kicked in. She dealt with enough brass trying to assign blame instead of fixing problems. Ambassador Ukmoth is cooperating fully. The leak was discovered, reported immediately, and action is being taken. That's what matters. What matters is that we nearly poisoned half the station. Nearly. Didn't. Because of soap and human children. Brooke kept her voice level but firm. You want to assign blame later? Fine. Right now, we need to focus on the fix. Lumpex's angular face, or what Brooke assumed was a face, regarded her with what might have been respect, or might have been irritation. Hard to tell across species lines. You're the human liaison. These are your offspring who caused the initial incident? My kids helped with dishes and accidentally revealed a critical infrastructure failure, Brooke said. So, yeah, they caused an incident. They also potentially saved lives. I'm going to call that a win. A win. Lumpex's translator made the word sound foreign, like they were testing its taste. The Keloth kitchen is destroyed. The water system is compromised. Station operations will be disrupted for weeks. And you call this a win? Better than the alternative. Brooke gestured at the crack in the wall, where more technicians were now working to contain the leak. The alternative was nobody finding this until people started getting sick. Until the contamination spread further. Until it became a genuine crisis, instead of a preventable problem. The station director was silent for a long moment, processing. Around them, the controlled chaos of emergency response continued. Teams sealing off contaminated sections, others running tests, administrators coordinating housing and resource distribution for the affected areas. The human has a point, the Donkai offered, still coated in drying bubbles and looking oddly cheerful about the whole situation. Our species has a saying, sometimes you must break the shell to find the rot inside. Or, well, that's the closest translation. The actual phrase involves spawning pools and fungal infections, but the sentiment holds. How very poetic, Lumpex said dryly. And how do we explain this to the Galactic Council? That human children playing in soap water revealed infrastructure failures that should have been caught by routine inspections? We tell them the truth, Ukmoth said quietly, the ambassador's voice steadier now despite the antennae that still drooped with shame. We tell them that the Keloth protocols were insufficient, that we prioritized appearance over function, that we failed in our duty to maintain true cleanliness, not just visible cleanliness, and that humans, Brooke added, with their chaotic, messy, unpredictable approach to everything, accidentally saved us from our own blind spots. Toby tugged on her sleeve. Does this mean we're not in trouble for the bubbles? Oh, you're still in trouble, Brooke said, but maybe slightly less trouble than before. How much less? We'll negotiate later. The emergency response took 6 hours to stabilize, which gave Brooke plenty of time to watch the galaxy's finest minds grapple with the fact that their state-of-the-art orbital station had been compromised by something as mundane as corroded pipes and institutional complacency. It also gave her time to watch her children fall asleep in a corner of the observation lounge, curled together like puppies, still covered in dried soap residue. She'd tried to clean them up, but station resources were being directed toward the actual crisis, and honestly, a little soap never killed anyone. Probably. Assuming it wasn't contaminated with biological waste, which thankfully it wasn't. By the time the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session the next morning, the full scope of the problem had been mapped. 12 sectors had compromised water lines. 8 showed active contamination. 4 were on the verge of structural failure that could have resulted in flooding, decompression, or both. The station hadn't been hours from disaster. It had been days, maybe a week. Brooke stood in the council chamber, a massive spherical room designed to accommodate beings of every configuration, with Toby and Mila flanking her. They'd been cleaned up properly now, dressed in fresh clothes that she kept in her emergency kit because parenting meant always preparing for disasters, both metaphorical and literal. The council members occupied their designated spaces: gravity wells, suspension fields, liquid environments, whatever their biology required. Station Director Lumpex presided from the center, rotating slowly to address all assembled parties. "We are here," Lumpex announced, their translator carrying to every corner of the chamber, "to discuss the incident that occurred in Sector Delta 9 and its larger implications for station safety and maintenance protocols." Ambassador Ukmoth stood in the Kaloth-designated area, looking smaller somehow, despite being the same size as yesterday. The ambassador's ceremonial robes had been replaced, but the posture remained defeated. "The Kaloth accept full responsibility," Ukmoth began, all 4 hands folded in a gesture of contrition. "Our maintenance protocols were inadequate. We focused on observable cleanliness while neglecting structural integrity. We have failed the Council and endangered the station's inhabitants." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, or whatever species-appropriate sounds indicated discussion. The Donkai bubbled thoughtfully. The Expelle chimed in concerned harmonics. Others made noises Brooke's translator didn't even attempt to render. However, Ukmoth continued, antennae straightening slightly, the failure was discovered before any irreversible harm occurred. Discovered by... The ambassador's compound eyes fixed on Brooke and the twins. By human younglings helping with dishes. "Explain," Lumpex commanded. So Ukmoth did. The cultural exchange dinner. The offer to help with cleaning. The soap, the water, the chaos, the bubbles, and the dislodged panel that revealed what meticulous surface cleaning had hidden for cycles. By the time the ambassador finished, several council members were making sounds that the translators interpreted as laughter, or at least their species equivalent. "Let me understand," said one of the Expelle, their crystalline body refracting light in thoughtful patterns. "Human children, barely past their first developmental phase, accomplished what our sophisticated monitoring systems and rigorous inspection protocols failed to achieve." "They made a mess," Brooke said, deciding honesty was the best approach. "A spectacular, disastrous mess. But that mess broke through the polish and showed us what was underneath." "The human approach," Lumpex observed, their tone unreadable, appears to be fundamentally incompatible with order. Oh, it absolutely is, Brooke agreed. We're chaotic. We stumble into things. We break stuff while trying to help. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that chaos shakes loose the problems that everyone else is too careful to find. Mom makes messes, too, Toby offered helpfully. Last week she tried to fix the food maker, and it exploded spaghetti everywhere. Thanks, buddy. Really helping my credibility here. But then you found out the pressure valve was broken, Mila added. And if it kept going, it would have exploded worse later. Brooke blinked. She'd forgotten about that detail. The kids had better memory for her failures than she did. So this is a pattern, Lumpex said, and now their tone definitely carried amusement. Humans create disasters that prevent larger disasters? We prefer to think of it as aggressive problem discovery, Brooke said. We're not great at maintaining perfection, but we're excellent at finding out what's wrong before it kills someone. The Donkai's translator crackled with what sounded like genuine delight. I propose we make this official. Human chaos as a diagnostic tool. Send them to inspect anything we believe is functioning perfectly. If it survives contact with human children, it's truly sound. That got actual laughter from multiple species, which was either a good sign or meant Brooke had just committed humanity to being the galaxy's official disaster inspectors. In all seriousness, Ukmoth said, raising all four hands for attention, the human approach, messy as it is, revealed a fundamental flaw in our thinking. The Kaloth have spent generations perfecting surface cleanliness. We believed that what could be seen and measured and polished was all that mattered. We forgot that some problems hide in the spaces between perfection. The ambassador turned to face Brooke and the twins directly. I formally thank the human younglings for their assistance, and for teaching the Kaloth that sometimes the path to true cleanliness requires making a mess first. You're welcome, Toby said brightly. Can we help with dishes again? Absolutely not, Ukmoth and Brooke said simultaneously. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Even Lumpex's rigid posture relaxed slightly. The Council will implement new protocols, the station director announced. All sectors will undergo structural integrity assessments, not just surface inspections. Infrastructure maintenance will be prioritized equally with visible cleanliness. And Lumpex paused, rotating to face the human delegation directly. Humans will be consulted on inspection methodologies. Your species' talent for creative destruction may prove valuable. We'll try not to break too much, Brooke promised. Please do break things, Lumpex countered. Break them in controlled ways that reveal hidden flaws. That is apparently your evolutionary advantage. Our evolutionary advantage is making messes? Mila asked. Your evolutionary advantage, the Expelli observer said, their harmonic voice carrying a warmth that transcended species boundaries, is making messes that matter. There is a difference. The council session continued, diving into technical details about repair timelines and updated protocols, but Brooke's attention drifted. She watched the assembled species, dozens of different evolutionary paths, different ways of thinking, different approaches to problems, all trying to work together despite their fundamental differences. Humanity was the newcomer here, the species still learning the rules. And apparently, their contribution was going to be breaking those rules in ways that helped everyone. She could live with that. The session finally adjourned after what felt like 6 rotations, but was probably only 2 hours. Diplomats dispersed, heading back to their respective sectors to begin implementing changes. Ukmoth approached Brooke as the chamber emptied. Your offspring created more chaos in one evening than I have experienced in my entire diplomatic career, the ambassador said. Sorry about that. Don't be. Ukmoth's antennae performed a complex pattern that the translator interpreted as thoughtful consideration. The Kaloth have a new saying as of this morning. Sometimes the cubs find what the adults miss. It loses something in translation, but the essence remains. That's actually kind of beautiful. It's also being added to our maintenance protocols. Section 1, Subsection 3. Assume nothing is as clean as it appears. Inspect with the thoroughness of a human child looking for mischief. Brooke laughed, genuine and surprised. You're really putting that in official documentation? We are a species that learns from our mistakes. Ukmoth's compound eyes glittered. Even when those mistakes involve soap bubbles and flying ceremonial dishes. Speaking of which, are those dishes okay? Miraculously, yes. Apparently, they're more durable than I gave them credit for. Rather like your species. They walked together toward the exit, two beings from completely different worlds, united by shared disaster and unexpected discovery. The twins ran ahead, their energy restored after sleep, already pointing at things and asking if they could touch them. Also, Ukmoth added quietly, the Donkai ambassador has requested that you recreate the bubble incident. They found it transcendently joyful and wish to experience it again. I am considering it as a wellness activity for moisture-dependent species. You want us to deliberately create chaos? I want you to be human, Ukmoth corrected. The chaos appears to be inevitable. We might as well benefit from it. Brooke caught up with her kids at the observation window, where they were once again pressing faces against the transparent aluminum and leaving prints. A maintenance drone approached to clean the marks, paused, then retreated. Apparently, someone had already updated the protocols. Some messes were acceptable now. Did we do good, Mom? Toby asked, not looking away from the stars. Yeah, kid, you did good. Even though we made a disaster? Especially because you made a disaster. Mila turned from the window, her expression serious in the way only 6-year-olds could manage. Does this mean we should always make messes? No, Brooke said firmly. It means that sometimes, when we're trying our best and things go wrong anyway, good stuff can still come from it. But you still have to try to do things right first. But what if doing it right means we miss the important stuff? Brooke opened her mouth, closed it, and realized her daughter had just summarized the entire diplomatic incident in one question. Then we're human, and we'll stumble into finding it eventually. That's kind of our thing. Outside the viewport, Nexus Orbital hung in space, imperfect, compromised, currently undergoing massive repairs, and somehow better for it. Behind the gleaming exterior, crews were tearing out old infrastructure and replacing it with systems designed for function over appearance. The station would be less pristine when they finished, but it would be safer, stronger, more honest about what it was. Sometimes that's what progress looked like. Messy, chaotic, and covered in soap bubbles. Brooke's personal communicator chimed. A message from Station Administration. Lieutenant Brooke Hansen, request your presence for consultation on new inspection protocols. Also, please keep your children away from the hydroponics bay. Sincerely, everyone. She smiled, pocketed the device, and herded her cubs toward their quarters. Another day in the galaxy, another disaster averted through aggressive incompetence. Humanity was going to fit in just fine.